Fantastic. Friends, will you pray with me? Loving and most engaging God, finding us when we wander. We pray with you once again. Bless the words of my mouth and the meditations of our collective hearts as we come together this beautiful Sunday morning. The Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So this morning we could have either talked about Ruth on the threshing floor, which I see you didn't read, but we could have, right? But we're going to talk about Mark. And this week's gospel reading is the 11th week of a 12-week walk through several chapters in Mark. And for many of us, we've heard this story. Do you know what it's referred to as? Anybody? No. Bueller? Come on, somebody knows what it's called. The widow's what?
Mite.
Yeah, right? It's often called the widow's mite. It's cast as a model of sacrificial giving. She's given everything she has for all. But if we look at this passage, I'm going to read it from the Message in a little bit. I think it's a little more complicated than that. Can you hear me, Mary? Okay, well, I hope you can hear more than some, but that's all right. You can listen to it at home, and you can even come sit up at this first row if you want. Okay, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and I think if we listen to this text, it's more interesting than just the widow and all of her might. While Jesus does lift up the widow as faithful and generous, his primary point is a powerful critique of what? Religious folks and the powers that be. And perhaps a celebration of how God turns the world upside down, right? We don't ever see that happen. Since his arrival in Jerusalem in Mark 11, Jesus plays with a series of disputes with the religious leaders. And today's story brings those disputes to their conclusion. Well, and I kind of argue with that because that's what scholars say, but really the conclusion of that is what? The cross, right? But today's dispute is kind of where it really kind of culminates. And in Mark 13, Jesus foretells of the destruction of the temple. And Mark was probably written just before or just after the Romans put down a major Jewish rebellion, devastating the temple in that process. So for Mark, not all of Jesus' interactions with the religious establishments were contentious. We see this, and he sometimes eats and lives alongside the Pharisees. He dines with them, he parties with them. We know that Jesus loved to do that kind of thing, hang out with them. But throughout his ministry, Jesus is avidly concerned with the hubris and the hypocrisy inside his own camp. I can identify with this. I sometimes see my colleagues or my not colleagues, because I don't have a private jet, y'all. You did not put that in my contract. I know, right? Right? I don't get a car or a driver or a condo or a vacation home. And neither did Jesus. And this brings him into conflict because he doesn't desire those things with religious authorities. So for Christians today that honor Jesus' teaching, and those of us that interpret them for this way, the inside the camp critiques of Christian religious arrogance and hypocrisy, including our own sometimes, right? Sometimes when we look at ourselves in the mirror and say, well, lest we arrogantly find fault with ourselves, we then have to look at this text to say, what does this mean for us? So let's listen to the Mind you, Mark's text and my own conversations with millennials is mostly why I don't wear robes, Hugh, during ordinary time, right? Now I do wear them during, I have a couple of them, and I wear white during Easter and Christmas and weddings and other events. But let's talk about this, right? He continued teaching. Watch out for, and this is the message, so I'm going to just give it this way. Watch out for the religious scholars. They love to walk around in their academic gowns, preening in the radiance of public flattery, basking in prominent positions, sitting at the head of the table at every church function. And all the time they are exploiting the weak and the helpless. And the longer their prayers, the worse they get. But they'll pay for it in the end. Sitting across from the offering box, he was observing how the crowd tossed money in for the collection. Many of the rich were making large contributions. One poor widow came up and put in 2 small coins, a measly 2 cents. Jesus called his disciples over and said, "The truth is, this poor widow gave more to the collection than all others put together. All the others gave what they'll never miss. She gave extravagantly what she couldn't afford. She gave it all." I'm going to tell you a story. It's not even in here. I had a dream last night, which is just really weird. I'm on some weird medication, but we won't go there. So Daryl Aaron is a friend of mine and an amazing pastor, and he's a reverend doctor in the Black church. But he talked to me once about why in the Black church the potluck was so important. And he talked to me about 2 reasons for this, and why in historic biblical times it was pretty amazing. In biblical times, when you had a dinner, and I'm not talking like a potluck, but like a banquet, and they would take your armaments, they would take your all of your weapons from you when you came into this dinner, right? So at the supper table, the banquet table, your hands were at the table. People could see your hands at the table, so you were disarmed. Friend or enemy, right? You're disarmed at the table. So that's one reason, right? You're at the table and you're able to trust that you're at that table and you're disarmed. So that's one reason. The other reason in the Black church, that is that at the church banquet table, Mary's mac and cheese has more value that she made, that's been known for 20 years to be the best mac and cheese all around, has just as much, if not more value than Scott's Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? She's made it, it's world renowned, it's the best. People come every 3 months for Mary's mac and cheese than for Scott's Kentucky Fried Chicken that he bought up the road, right? It's valuable, it's known, she's made it, she's not giving up that recipe for sure, you know, and we know how valuable it is. And it evens the playing field for giving, right? The offering that we bring to that table is even, right? Even though Scott went and bought some Kentucky Fried Chicken, it is the option to give is even. So how many of us have given our opinion about something and it said, well, that's just my 2 cents worth, right? It's kind of undervaluing in a way of letting the person know we're talking about. That's just my opinion. The listener's free to agree or disagree. When we add our 2 cents worth to a discussion, we let people know that that's just what I think. I could be wrong. I'm no expert. Take it for what it's worth. But the widow's 2 cents, or her 2 copper coins, as they're referred to in the text, they have a worth to her that's extravagant, right, when she's giving that. When we're looking at this text, her 2 cents, well, there was a penny in this text, but in our society, you know, we're talking about 2 cents, they're her everything. And let's look at the story as a whole. Maybe it'll help to remember what's just happened in this story. Jesus and his disciples have been walking beside the temple that King Herod had taken years to build. The disciples have been pointing to these large stones that form the temple foundation. And Jesus has predicted the destruction of this temple. Imagine 1870? When they're building? Imagine 1870 and a day. Someone walks by and says, oh, this is gonna fall, right? 1870 in a day. Well, that'd be pretty disturbing, right? We just built it, everything's shiny and new. Coats of paint have just went up. We just, erected our building, and somebody said, oh no, it's not gonna be here tomorrow. I'd be pretty upset, right? So what is the main point that Mark is trying to make, or the author here? Why are these two short paragraphs, what is it, like 6 lines, really happening in here? And Mark is a short storyteller. He doesn't give us a lot to go on. There's a lot happening in between, right? And then, right? We know that Mark is like out of breath telling the story. One about watching out for the scribes. One about a poor widow putting her entire meager living into the treasury. And a church that we don't really trust, right? Could there be more than one valid way to interpret this passage? I'm going to tell you that, right? Isn't there always in this book that we've taken 2,000 years to hang on to? There could probably be 100 different messages that we're going to take away from this. And if so, which interpretation might apply to us today? I'm going to give you a couple thoughts here. And hopefully if you leave here, you're going to leave with maybe more than 2 cents worth. So let's talk about that a little bit. So Robert Brown Taylor says the widow, and Matt, I've taken a little bit of inspiration from you and your plays here. Robert Brown Taylor says the widow is a bit player, right? Who knows what a bit player is? Come on. Take your mask down.
You're there to play a caricature or a specific kind of.
But like a minor role, right?
Yeah, a little cartoon version to affect the overall story.
Right. So one of the extras who ring the stage while the major characters stride around dazzling people with their costumes, right? Right. The other people are high drama, right? So as we look at our church comparatively to some of the larger churches in our denomination, might we be a bit player? Some might say that, right? Some might say that. Our budget won't come close to, there's a preacher called Creflo Dollar. Well, guess what he has? He has a jet. Yep, he has a jet, a vacation home.
Paul Mitchell fan?
Probably. Yep. My friend really loves Joel Osteen. When I went back for that funeral, she was like, my favorite pastors. I tried to get her to watch our Zoom. She's like, are you like Joel Osteen? I'm like, who? She's like, he jumps around. I was like, you think I jump around? Do I look like I jump around? Have you seen me jump around? No. I was like, I do some word study sometimes. She's like, what's a word study? I was like, ooh, well, all right.
It's when you study words.
She won't be tuning into our Zoom, folks. So sorry. I said we're open and affirming. She's like, oh. All right. So just like those 2 copper coins didn't come close to what the Pharisee and those with robes had to offer. But guess what? Those robes are what? They're costumes. Right? Those jets. What do they have to offer? Those coins, they're authentic gifts given in privacy, given with integrity. And so is our open and affirming statement. So is our table, right? Mark's gospel continues to compel the disciples towards what? Vision. And visioning towards future. The future model of a ministry without walls, right? And that temple destruction, what does it do? It compels Judaism and eventually Christianity to be a world religion. Had that temple not been destroyed, who knows? Judaism may have been locked into that temple right there. It would have never disseminated into all the earth. right? And there's something here for us as we look at our ministry, one where our property team and trustees are meeting, one where we're working on a mission, which I was sent out to y'all, by the way, so take a look at that. I know Gail responded, I read your response, right? One where we're learning what it means to be a church that is both an altar in this world and has this beautiful historic building. Both 1 foot here and 1 foot out there, right? Our 2 cents, our 2 coins might be small, but our present, our gift, is our presence. And as we free ourselves from the constraint of religious expectations, which is what they're kind of doing here, right? And move towards that of community, we can be what? That of who and whom Jesus calls us to be. It means that we can make more from less. That 2 coins and some authenticity means that I only wear my robes a few times a year, right? And flashy services, what? That's not what people are looking for. Well, that's what some people are looking for, but are those the people that we are called to serve? Probably not, right? Do we desire to be a mega church? Is that what we desire? It's not gonna fit here. It's not gonna fit on this land. There's not room for it here. And if we could fit it here, there'd be no place for these folks to park. I don't know what to tell you. They'd have to like click their heels, right? They'd have to do some time travel stuff. But it is true to who we are, right? And we find our community together. It means we have less stuff and more people and resources to work with. More trust in God and each other. And I'll say it again, I know I say it often, I don't say it every Sunday. I can see them, right? Those people. They're here-ish, right? We see them. Beth has seen a few of them. You know, we come in contact with them. We have to open our doors and our hearts, and we also have to go. You know, we stay and we go. We come and we go, right? We have a building, but we are not a building, right? It's like I have a robe, but I'm not a robe, right? But it's not just who we are and who folks are and for us to be. People need to know that they can come with their joys and their fears and their tears. They need to know that we'll meet them at the car shows or somewhere else because there's not going to be one next year, right? The streets for protest and at their bedsides when they're sick, right? That we'll love them and their 2 coins will matter as much as their check for $2,000, right? Carrie Newcomer writes a song, it's We Can Do This Hard Thing. And I think that's where we're at right now. We have a lot of decisions to make. We have a lot of choices to make. And we can get stuck, right? Those disciples could have gotten stuck, right? They could have gotten stuck there. They could have gotten stuck at the cross. They could have gotten stuck in the grief. Just like Ruth could have gotten stuck last week and paralyzed, not knowing whether to stay or to go. There are always choices, friends. Jesus had choices. Some say it was predestined. Some say Jesus had choices. He had choices for who the disciples were going to be. And friends, those disciples were not perfect. They were not, they were bumbling fools sometimes. They made lots of mistakes. And we're gonna make mistakes too along the way. I'm sure you were perfect before I got here, so I'm not gonna, I have no idea. You were perfect before I got here, but I'm not perfect. So we're gonna make some mistakes doing this together. And I'm sure there are gonna be tears, right? As we make these choices together. But we can do this hard thing. And some of us will give everything we have to do this hard thing together. But we can do this hard thing. Amen.